Hello, everyone. I hope you hear me well. Maybe you can send a message on the chat to tell me if everything is going well. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're really happy to present you this fourth webinar that Pricing Hub is organizing. So this webinar is going to be on the next subject, which is how to measure the impact of my pricing action. It's going to last more or less 30 minutes. And what we want to do is to create some polls during the webinar in order to have your feedbacks on what we are sharing with you. And also at the end of the webinar, we are going to organize a short Q&A session where we will be able to exchange our point of views. Obviously, if you have any question during the webinar, don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer it at the end. So I'm going to start by presenting you a small overview of the current situation. So first, regarding the pricing strategies, we currently are facing a situation where we have three main problems. Even if there is an enormous amount of data, we lack accessibility. We also lack automation to be more productive and to avoid mistakes. And finally, prices are in most situations consumer-centric, are not consumer-centric, sorry, are competition-centric, which drives the prices to the lowest. But obviously, it's not it. There is also a constantly evolving and thus very challenging economic situation. We face an inflationary trend. Distribution are getting more and more complex, and obviously competition is exacerbated with always more and more competitors on each and every market. Thus, that's the reason why today Excel is no longer enough. Companies which are still not using pricing tools are making too many errors, are focusing on time-consuming tasks, and are not taking enough the context into account. And so we estimate that there is a loss of 10% of turnover in those kind of action, and it comes from a BCG study. So this is how Pricing Hub works. We've created a very comprehensive and simple tool to help you take the right decision. We use data such as from your catalog, transaction, and competition, and we analyze it for you. Then the second step is that we define together the prices rule and constraint that you'd like to follow for your automation. Then our artificial intelligence evaluates your consumer price sensitivity and calculate the recommendation. And finally, we give you the choice to validate the recommendation we gave you before sending it to your information system. And as our algorithms are based on machine learning, we use all the information we are creating in order to optimize again the prices so that it makes a virtuous cycle. And finally, about our mission, what we do is that we bring pricing expertise and technology to help retailers and e-commerce leaders to protect their margin and to put consumer price sensitivity at the center of price optimization. And yeah, Pricing Hub is really a simple and intuitive SaaS solution actionable by any person in charge of optimizing a P&L. So that's all for the very small introduction in order to spend most of the time focusing on what we want to talk about right now is how to measure the impact of your pricing actions. So first, we're going to present you the purpose to measure it, then the challenges, and finally the means. And I give the floor to Guillaume, who just arrived to present you the rest.
Hi everyone. So indeed, if you can stick it on the previous slide, please, Aurelie.
Yeah.
Glad to see you all. And basically, we are going to cover 3 topics on this pricing impact measurement. First of all, we will cover why do we want to achieve this, what are the challenges that we are going to face ahead, and what are the means to cover that. The first element is the purpose indeed, and we believe that there are three major reasons why to
Yeah. Apparently, we just lost Guillaume. We are going to give him a few minutes in order to come back and to present us the purposes. Yeah, I think he's coming back already. Perfect.
Yeah, sorry. There is an internet problem in our office. I'm very sorry about it. So I was saying that there are 3 major reasons: the understanding of the performance, the ability to convince the other stakeholders, and the capability to trade or pilot the performance. Indeed, if we are willing to measure this famous pricing impact is because we are willing, first of all, to understand how much my performance is aligned with the strategic goals that I have defined. How much is it aligned with the objectives and the constraints that I have defined? Because I need to know I need to know the answer to the question: Am I achieving what I wanted? Second element in the understanding is the capability to understand who are the good and the bad students, let's say, which means which are positive and the negative contributors to my overall objective and goals. The third element within this understanding is, of course, the capability to understand if we are performing positively in terms of ROI versus all of the investments we made. We are making various investments in pricing, resources, tools, softwares, infrastructures, and so on. So we need to be able to understand if overall it was a valid investment or not. So all of this is the understanding. The second element is the second reason why we are willing to measure this pricing impact is because we need to be able to convince our peers, our top managements, our stakeholders. Indeed, the pricing function is a very transversal function, and whereas all of the other functions are mostly vertical. Indeed, the reason why we are saying that the pricing and revenue management is a transversal function is because it is impacting all of the other ones. Hence, we need to embark the other ones. We need to embark all of our colleagues, all of our stakeholders, as well as our top management, in terms of understanding what is the performance that we achieved, what was the methodology we used in order to measure this performance, what was the ROI, what was the impact on all of the relevant KPIs that are interested for us, but also for them, and of course the elements related to what was the performance of each single type of score. These 2 elements, understanding and convincing, enables as well to achieve the third objective, which is the ability to trade or pilot the performance. If I don't know what is the pricing impact of what I do, how can I optimize it? I need to be able to know if my pricing strategy is performing good or not, so that I can pilot and adjust my strategy. Adjust it both in terms at a macro level, meaning at overall level, and as well in terms of consumer segment and product cluster. So all in all, we believe that we are all willing to measure the pricing impact in order to be able to understand it deeply, but as well granularly, in order to convince our stakeholders, and finally in order to pilot the performance, to trade our performance.
Okay, so now you have the ability to answer the first question of the poll. If you click on it, you can just submit your vote, and we will be able to see who answered and what are the figures. It looks like most of the participants are agreeing. Like we have 88% of yes for now. For the people who answered no, if you want to develop the reason why you you think you need to add or remove something, don't hesitate to add it in the chat, and we're going to continue the presentation for now.
Now we'd like to speak quickly about the quick challenges. What are the big challenges that we are going to face ahead in order to measure this pricing impact? We believe that we have three major challenges ahead: data related, methodology related, and granularity related. In terms of data, which is probably the biggest that we are all facing when we are willing to measure our impact, indeed we believe that there is the acronym RAC, which is representing the three sub-challenges: reliability, accessibility, and consistency of data. All of us, we very often hear the famous quotes, garbage in, garbage out, or pricing is the biggest lever to increase profitability or operational growth. Of course, these two sentences are valid, but they are extremely valid on pricing because of the nature of the pricing output is based on the accuracy of the data. So if we don't have this famous RAC, which is achieved, then it's very likely that the accuracy and the relevance of the output is going to be damaged. This famous quote, when we say that pricing is the biggest and most powerful lever, we could also put it the other way around and say that it could also be the most powerful lever to destroy value. Even though it's not a great sales message to say that, but that's because it is actually true. If we were to base our assumptions on inaccurate, inconsistent, or polluted data, then it's very likely that the outcome of our pricing recommendations will be actually destroying value. Hence, this data RAC sounds for us the basis and the first challenge to solve. The second one is related to the methodology, on which we are going to deep dive in a second. Methodology, the key concept is to be able to trust it and to be consistent with it. As we previously said, the pricing is so transversal that it needs to be trusted by everyone in the company. Then it's absolutely crucial to be able to be exhaustive in the KPIs that are measured within this methodology, as well as to be able that everybody, all the stakeholders, are validating, are aligned with the way we are measuring it. And we need to distinguish the way the performance measurement versus the pricing impact measurement. And this methodology should highlight it. It's also very important to admit in this methodology that we are not looking for perfection, because we'll see that in a minute, that there is actually no methodology that is going to give the perfect measurement of the pricing impact due to the various challenges that exist behind. However, it's very important to be consistent in it and also to align within the other stakeholders behind in order to not constantly debate and re-challenge and so on the methodology itself, but to accept the pros and cons of the different methodology, to select one, to be consistent with it, and then to spend the debate on the trading strategy adjustments and not on the constant methodology adjustment. Finally, the third challenge that we foresee is the granularity of the output. It's very important to be able to deliver the pricing impact output at a macro level and at a micro level. The macro level is obvious because we need to know overall, for the three previous reasons, how am I performing overall on all of my pricing strategy. But in order to be able to identify granularly who are the positive and negative contributors, we need to be able to find out which are the segments of consumers, which are the segments of products that are performing in an aligned way versus the objective and the constraints that I have defined, and the ones that are not. So once again, the ability to respect the data RAC, the method TNC, and the granularity M&M is something that sounds particularly important in order to achieve the three different purposes that we mentioned before.
So the second poll is already available, and we're going to continue at the same time.
So now we are going to touch the methodology itself. Basically, what we are saying is that we need to resolve a pretty simple equation, if I can use this term. Pricing impact is basically the difference between the actual performance we are making on whatever KPI versus what would have been the performance we would have achieved if we would not have performed our pricing actions. Okay. So this is pretty simple on paper, but of course the key question is, how do I measure, how do I assess what is my expected KPI value? What is the expected performance I would have done if I would not have performed my pricing action? The answer to this question is basically the reason why this question is a bit challenging is because there is one element which we call the context and pricing up, which is impacting the overall performance. The context is the accumulation of three elements: the seasonality, the internal action or events. By internal, we mean all of the actions and the events that are happening in your company: marketing actions, supply actions, offer actions, anything. Okay, and all of these actions have the ambition to deliver an impact as well in terms of volume, in terms of profit, in terms of revenue, and also, of course, the external events. Okay, competition, weather, entertainment events, and so on. Okay, so all of these, each of these three elements are composing what we call the context, and the context is, of course, influencing the expected performance. So here we are trying to solve a very simple equation: the difference between the actual performance versus the expected performance. But the challenge is how to define a methodology which is going to allow us to measure what is this expected KPI. To do so, there are basically three different concepts. If you can move on to the next slide, please, already. The three different concepts are basically what we call the measurement, the historical measurement in a pre-post measurement, experimentation, and a forecasting based in AI. Okay. The first one consists in comparing the period before and the period after the price change, and those to simply establish that the pricing impact is the difference between the two. Of course, the advantage of this approach is the simplicity, the transparency, white box aspect of it, etc. But it doesn't cover the biggest challenge that we just discussed, which is the context. Okay, because it doesn't reflect the fact that the context has changed. Hence, the accuracy of it and the relevance of it is negatively impacted. On the right-hand side, the approach would consist in saying, I'm going to leverage a lot of historical data, and I'm going to collect all of the elements that are composing the context, and then I'm going to forecast, to predict using machine learning, AI, and so on. I'm going to predict my performance. This has the benefit of trying to leverage everything, but it is also offering some drawbacks, which are the black box effect, which are the fact that it's extremely difficult to consider all of these contextual elements, and it's very difficult to consider them with the relevant weight and so on. That's why, in order to measure the impact, most of the different use cases that exist, most of the people are considering that the experimentation method is the method trusted as the one checking most of the requirements. The experimentation method consisting simply in saying, I'm going to expose a given scope to my price change, and there will be another which I'm not going to expose my price change. This second scope is called the control group. Okay, and the big benefits of it is that the two different scopes are actually exposed to the same contextual elements. So the reason why this method is commonly trusted is because this is a method which is quite transparent and which is exposing both groups to the same concept. Okay. There is a drawback, which is, of course, that there is always a control group which is not exposed to the price change, and thus that is not optimized. This is a major drawback of this approach. Now, within this method, within the experimentation approach, there are different ways to execute it. Indeed, the key challenge behind is how to define the control group. How can I build my control group within this? Okay. Control group being, once again, the given scope which is not exposed to the price change, but which is exposed to the same contextual elements as the group that I'm going to optimize, my optimized group. In order to do so, there are 5 ways to define this control group. We can split the optimized group versus the control group via the inventory. So this is called the inventory split. The inventory split consists in saying I'm going to identify another group of my inventory, a group of belonging to the same category usually, and I'm going to use them as my control group. So I'm going to optimize my tablets, and I'm going to observe the difference of performance of my computers at the same time. For example, if I identify that the computers are behaving the same way as my tablets. Right? Another way is to identify the control group based on the time series. So here it consists in saying I'm going to take the same group of SKU that I'm optimizing, but there will be a portion of time, a given day, a range of hours, etc., where I'm not going to apply my price change. Okay, and then I'm going to observe. I'm going to compare the difference of performance. Once again, we are going a difference of performance considering the seasonality effect, the change of demand, and so on. Okay, so here it's interesting because we are really using the same SKU. Another element is what we call the transversal split, which consists in saying I'm going to build my control group by actually considering the same SKU as the one I'm optimizing, but I'm going to look at these SKU on another channel. Let's say I am having actually two different channels. One is web, one is offline, or actually I'm fully offline, but I'm distributing in let's say the north of the country and the south of the country. Then I'm going to observe what is the evolution of performance of my very same SKUs within the two different channels. Another way to do it is by splitting the traffic, which is marketingly expressed as A/B test or MAB, etc., which consists basically to say I'm going to split my users into two different groups, two different partitions, and then I'm going to be able to see what is the difference of performance between the users that have been exposed to my price change versus the user visitors that have not been exposed to my price change. The last one is the one that we call causal impact, which is commonly used by the data scientist community, which consists in saying that we are constantly going to modelize what is the relevant control group versus the optimized group that we are doing. Okay? What we are going to do is basically that we are constantly modelizing what is the relevant group of category or group of channels, which is relevant versus our test group. So we will see that each of the methods have pros and cons. So indeed, as you can see, once we have chosen that the experimentation methodology is the relevant one, we need to assess what is the right one among these 5 options in order to be our methodology, and meaning to achieve trust, consistency, and adoption within the company. If we are willing to try to measure the pros and cons based on 4 criteria that we have highlighted, which are usually used as the key criteria in order to make them adapted, then let's try to position each of them. The first one being the transparency. The transparency criteria basically means the capability to understand exactly how the pricing impact was measured. Or another way to say it is the reproducibility of it. Okay. The time series split is usually the one that is considered to be the easiest to reproduce, and the one which is very transparent. Why? Because it's very easy to observe what is the difference in performance between the time series that has been selected as a group of control. Okay, compared to the other method. On the other side, the causal impact is the one which is seen as the less transparent, or as the most black box driven. Why so? Because this is the one for which the control group is changing constantly. Hence, it's very difficult for an analytical person to be able to clearly to mathematically constantly measure the difference, because the control group is changing over time. The second criteria is the overall range. Indeed, very often, in order to adopt a method, what we are saying is, I want to choose a method which is the one which is having the highest accuracy, hence the lowest error range. Right. On this one, it's interesting to see that the ones that are the more on the right hand side, meaning the one having the highest accuracy, are the ones that are usually the ones that are the most difficult to implement. You've got the traffic split, which in most of our retailer customers are difficult to implement because either they are brick and mortar retailers where the traffic split is not an eligible method because you can't say to a visitor and another that you've got a different price change. And in the web, there are a lot of retailers which are not willing or not equipped to proceed with price change, despite the fact that this is the one, if it's well executed, this is the one having the highest accuracy. Very close to it, there is a causal impact, which has the drawback of being the less transparent. In terms of operationality, this is also interesting to see that the ones that are ranking the poorest are the two ones I just mentioned, the traffic split and the causal impact, for the same reason as I just mentioned. On the other side, these three other ones are pretty operational. By operational, we mean that these are methodologies that are quite easy to implement, meaning that most of our customers are actually facing absolutely no problem to implement an inventory split, a transversal split, or a time series split, because operationally there is almost no constraints to achieve this. And finally, the business coverage. Indeed, this criteria is quite important because usually what we are hearing is okay, I'm willing to adopt a method which is not going to jeopardize my capability to optimize my performance on the largest cost possible. Okay, and then the methods again, we've got the causal impact, which is ranking poorly because usually we need to have a lot of categories or channels which are not exposed to the price change in order to be able to measure properly. Okay. On the other side, we've got once again the time series split, which is ranking positively because a small range of hours or just 1 day out of 7 is actually enough to be able to measure. All of the other ones are ranking in a similar way. So as you can see, when we are trying to assess what is the relevant methodology, and once we have acknowledged that the experimentation sounds the relevant approach, then there are several options that are ahead, and there is not one single truth. There are several options, and for each single retailer, we should assess what is the relevant approach in order to make sure that the pros and cons are accepted by the retailer. Finally, we come back to our basic measurement, where we are willing to basically measure the difference between our actual KPI versus our expected performance. And you would have understood that what we are doing is by basically looking at the KPI of last year, of the previous year, for the same scope as the one we are optimizing, and then we are going to establish to allocate to it the evolution of performance used by the control group. Hence, it's important to define what is this control group with relevance and with a good representativity of the KPI of the optimized group. Then we can establish the comparison between the actual KPI versus the expected KPI.
Okay, so here is the final poll. So you can rank the last question, and at the same time we received already 2 questions. Also, just to finish, so the first question was from Bertrand. Here you assume high volume, audiences sales over the period considered. What is the solution for industries with lower audiences and sales volume, where control groups testing could struggle to find relevance?
Indeed, you're right. We need to find a control group which is having sufficient volume to not be volatile, because if it is too volatile, this is very likely going to mean that it is not going to be representative enough. So indeed, we need to be able to find a control group with sufficient volume. I would say that we can use maybe I don't know if the traffic is an option for you, or if another country can be relevant and so on. So for each retailer, we need to assess what could be the most relevant control group. Also, the last point on this would be we are actually measuring the error range or the accuracy rate or the confidence factor. So we could also expect that we are delivering this pricing impact with the information of the error range, knowing that it could be quite high in case you've got a control group which is pretty small. The question is again, what do you do with this pricing impact? Once you know the pros and cons, if you are able to know that you've got a high error range, then maybe you will wait a little bit more time in order to be able to take action that are derived from this pricing impact measurement. So let's say that the importance is to see all of the options, and if it happens that there is no control group that can be selected with a sufficient volume, then I would say that the exposure of the error range should be the factor which is enabling you to interpret them correctly.
Thank you very much. I saw that there was another question, but my computer is lagging, so I can't see it anymore. That's great. At the same time as it's loading again, just wanted to tell you also that we have 2 other webinars coming in the next month. The next one is in 2 weeks, and it's about our product roadmap, and we'd like you to participate if you're interested about it, to help us define the product roadmap. And the second one, it's going to be at the end of September, and it's about how to combine competitive alignment and consumer price sensitivity. And it's also a very interesting webinar that you can attend. I don't know why I can see. Maybe Guillaume, you can see the question. I think it was another question from Bertrand, but it's just not working on my side.
There was a question from Bertrand saying, what about the infrastructure, the tools and processes and expertise as key challenge? Indeed, so these are let's say that these are the equipment in order to achieve the relevant methodology. So typically the methodology based on traffic splits, you need to have the right tools internally in order to achieve this. So usually the answer to this, let's say, these challenges are enabling some options to be eligible or not eligible. Okay, so these are the two. These are usually items that are covered when we assess a different methodology. We have lots of customers that are willing to implement one methodology or another, but we are realizing that the elements that Bertrand is mentioning, infrastructure, tools, processes, are not covered, and thus the retailer is not eligible to this methodology. I see another question related to the performance measurement, which could be done at a product level or at another aggregation level. Indeed, that's a question we have very often. The capability to say, should I measure my impact on specific SKU so that I can understand if this SKU performed well or not, or should I measure it in an aggregated way? We usually like to say option 2, meaning in an aggregated way. And the reason why we say that is because there is cannibalization effect and there is cross-elasticity effect between the products. Okay, so by analyzing the pricing impact of one single product, it's very likely that we are actually not observing the impact of this given product, but we are also analyzing what is the impact of the other price change that we did on the other products that are cannibalizing this one. So that's why we usually do not measure the impact per single SKU, but we measure it per cannibalized group of products. We can give it a name. We like to call it a portfolio of products, for example. But that's the reason why we do so, because it's much better to embed the cannibalization effect and the cross-elasticity that does exist between the products within this pricing impact measurement. That's why we believe within the risk rather than single SKU pricing impact measurement. And I don't see any other question to answer your question already.
Okay. So if everyone has asked all his questions, I think we can close this webinar. We want to thank you all a lot for participating, and we hope to see you soon, either through webinars or also we also have an event in Lille, beginning of October. So if you're in France and you want to meet us in real life, don't hesitate to participate to the event. We'd be glad to spend this moment with you. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.